Hey guys, Skylar Thomas here. Today's video, I'm going to be showing you a very easy but very cool video editing trick, how to get run over by a car. It's a trick that I did in my 6 masking tricks in 2 minutes video, but since I get a lot of requests to do more full-length tutorials, and I use masking in just about every one of my tricks, I figured this would be a good opportunity to kind of cover this particular trick on a step-by-step basis. So let's hop into Premiere Pro and I'll show you just how to do it. Alright, so here we are in Premiere Pro. All I've done with this particular project is I've imported a few different clips, all shot on the same tripod static shot. One is going to be of a car driving by. Another is of me on a clear road where I make sure there's no cars coming. I do this little drop down. And then I get a little static shot of the background. I use this sometimes when things don't quite match up the way I want them to. With the other shots, it's always nice to have a backup shot just of the background. I don't think I'll use it, but it's always good to get that static shot of the background without any actions taking place. So the next thing I want to talk about a little bit is setting up the shot, because sometimes 70% of the work is how you set up the shot. To kind of drive this point home, I'm going to show you one of the first attempts that I had of trying to do this particular trick. And the way I set up the shot was I was pretty low to the ground. It was at a time of day when there was a lot of shadow behind the car, and you could really kind of see underneath the car. And the reason this didn't really work out the way I wanted it to is when you drop down, there's going to be no shadow on you. And you're going to have to do this in post. This is actually what it's going to look like. And so what you end up having to do is create all these different duplicate layers, and you're having to do animations of the masks over them. And you're having to do color corrections to make it look like you're part of the shadow. And that's just a total pain. It took a long time. And ultimately, it didn't quite look the way I wanted it to look. It doesn't look terrible, but the effect didn't quite sell the way I wanted it to. So set up the shots so you don't have to deal with that kind of stuff, and you're going to be very happy in the post process. Okay, so now that we're within here, we can see that there's no shadow to deal with behind the car, and you can't see underneath the car. So we are now ready to start masking. Now the first thing we need to do is we need to line up these 2 different clips on top of one another. So I want the car to drive over me just as I drop down into that position right there. So I'm going to click into that clip, and I'm going to hit M in that position. It'll leave a marker right in that position. It'll help me align them afterwards. Now I'm going to kind of gauge where I think the car is as it starts to drive over. I'm going to hit M there. And now I'm going to click back into this particular clip, and I'm going to drop the opacity down so I can see through it. And this will help us as we try to align the 2. Now I'm going to try to set these markers up right on top of one another to see where we're at. And I did a pretty good job, it seems like. Perfect. That's just what we want. Okay. Now I'm going to bring the opacity back up. And now what we want to do is right before that car gets there is we want to draw a mask around where my body is with my shadow as I'm walking up to the car. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set it right to this point. And in order to create a mask in Premiere, if you're unfamiliar, you want to highlight your clip, you want to go to the Effect Controls panel, and you want to go down to Opacity. You've got a couple different shape tools you can use, but you also have the Pen tool, which allows you to create a custom shape mask. We're going to click on that Pen tool, and we're going to start drawing out a mask, being sure not to get into this kind of shadowy area because the tree is going to be moving with the wind and the shadows are going to be moving, and they're probably not going to line up between clips if we mask in between the shadow. So here we go, we're going to draw out this area. Okay, so now we can see the car coming, and now I'm going to go back in time to see if we're covering my entire body, and it looks like we do a pretty good job. Now, if you're unfamiliar with what feather means, this means it creates a little area between the edge of our mask and the other clip that it kind of blends the 2 together. So if you have a different kind of looking exposure, like perhaps a cloud had gone by and this will look a little bit darker, instead of doing the color correction tool, you can kind of blend that area so it doesn't look like there's a hard line around your mask. Now if we click away, we can see that it looks pretty clean here, but if we wanted to, we could up that feather just slightly, and it'll kind of help blend the 2 together. Okay. All right, so now we're going to find the part of the clip where the car just gets to the mask, And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my blade tool and I'm going to cut the clip right there. From here, what we want to do is highlight the mask that we did create, and we're just going to delete it. And now what we're going to do is drop the opacity on this clip, and this is where we're going to begin animating a custom mask around the car's nose and my body. So I'm actually going to drop the opacity even further, and here we go. Just like that. And now we're going to go to mask path, hit the stopwatch so that we can start animating the shape of our mask, and we're going to go forward just 1 frame. And now we're going to take each of these points of the mask and we're going to move them along with the car. And we're going to do that for each frame until I've completely covered my body with the car. Okay, we're done. We're going to set this back to fit. And what I'm going to do, since the body is completely covered, is I'm going to take my blade tool one more time and I'm going to cut right here. And what we can do is we can actually, while the car is driving over, we can just bring this out a few frames. But what we're going to do now is bring the opacity back up, and we're going to see how that looks. What we can even do is bring up the mask feather just a little bit, because that's going to help with the selling of the kind of motion blur of the car as it drives over me. Perfect. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go into that next clip and we're going to delete out that mask one more time, because we want to do a completely new mask for that particular clip. And what we're going to do is go back in about 150%, and we're going to go out to the point where the car just starts to go over my body and reveal my body. So what I'm going to do now is start drawing out another mask around the edge of the car. And now we're going to animate that mask by hitting the stopwatch, and we're going to go ahead a frame. And now we're going to animate that mask so it follows along the edge of the car as it drives and reveals my body. So here we go. Okay, so now that we're done with that, we're going to go back to fit, and we're going to bring the opacity back up to its entirety. And now that it's completely, my body is completely open here, one more time, the blade tool, I'm going to cut right there, and we can kind of take a look to see what it looks like. Let's, once again, we're going to up the feather just slightly to simulate that motion blur, and that looks pretty good to me. Now the last thing we can do is we can take a look at this last clip. We'll highlight the path, and then we'll just make the mask bigger as I start to walk away from the car. And that's all we have to do. All right, and that's it. It's pretty easy to accomplish. Before I go though, I do want to give a shout out to Colin McClive. He is my first patron on Patreon, and as I'm finding out that you really don't make any money from the YouTube AdSense, I could use all the help that I could get when it comes to actually being able to continue creating this kind of content on YouTube. So shout out to you, Colin, and if anyone else wants to help my channel, please go down in the description to the video. You're going to see a link to my Patreon there. Thank you all so much, and as always, I'll see you in the next video. Peace.